Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Miranda was sitting with her friend Nancy in a cafe, and over a cup of coffee, they were having a heated discussion. Nancy was indignant. "Miranda, I don't understand you. Your father is a millionaire, he has several huge corporations. You're supposed to be rolling in butter, and you can't get out of nightclubs. And you're walking around like a mouse, no bright makeup, no normal clothes. He's got you under his thumb. Are you afraid of him?" Miranda sighed and answered her friend for the 100th time. "Nancy, don't you get it? My father works hard from morning till night. He wants me to study, and not to lead a promiscuous lifestyle. He worries about me. I love him, and I don't want to upset him with any tricks." Nancy wrinkled her nose contemptuously. "Phew, you're boring and tedious. How can I put up with you? Well, let's at least go to a new cafe in a week, please, otherwise I'll die of boredom soon." Miranda relented under pressure. "All right, you talked me into it. We'll go on Sunday, just for a little while, okay? Because I have to study, I have a lot of homework." Nancy snorted. "You only have school on your mind. I don't feel like studying at all." My friend said goodbye in joy and rushed off to her manicure, while Miranda leisurely finished her coffee and thought. Nancy's mother died in childbirth. She had only seen her in a portrait in her father's study and in old family photos. Dad Thomas was a famous millionaire, the owner of several huge corporations and many tailoring shops. With his future wife, Lola, the man met back in the student days of the distant Soviet Union. At the age of 18, she was a neighbor at their village. Thomas fell in love with her immediately and forever. She seemed to him like a tiny spike in the field, her voice as clear and resonant as a bell. The future businessman and his wife began their life together in an ordinary family dormitory, in a 1 meter by 1 meter room with a common kitchen for the entire corridor. Despite the hardships, those were the happiest years of his life. He still often recalled how they had fun celebrating Lola's birthday with a pan of fried potatoes and a bottle of Sprite lemonade. When the man began earning his first capital, they sewed their own clothes first, right there in the basement of the dormitory. They rented a room and set up their first machines. The same hungry but capable students worked there part-time. Furthermore, they bought their own apartment, rented a decent building for their first at Lyre, and purchased normal equipment. Slowly, little by little, things began to happen. Lola never complained about her health, always selflessly helped her husband in his endeavors, sometimes working until midnight, not sparing herself at all. Soon there was a joyous and exciting event. My wife became pregnant. Lola's pregnancy was going great, no abnormalities. When Lola's water broke during the night, and she was taken by ambulance to the hospital, she felt fine and joked with her frightened husband. "Don't worry, I won't be long, you won't have time to miss me." Nothing foretold trouble. Happy Thomas was waiting outside the maternity hospital with a bouquet of gladioluses, which he could hardly find. When the doctor came out and told him the worst news of his life, he could not believe the reality of what was happening. His Lola had died right in childbirth. A blood clot had broken off, a tragic accident. The funeral was like a dream. He could barely remember anything, some people, a coffin. The inconsolable Thomas dropped his hands and even got drunk for a week. He didn't want to see his daughter at first, and even considered giving her up. He felt like she was the reason everything had happened. If it hadn't been for the pregnancy, Lola would be alive and well now. But a week after the funeral, he dreamt of Lola. She was standing there in her colorful robe, severely reprimanding him, wagging her finger. "Tom, are you crazy? Get that baby out of the orphanage right now. That's your daughter. Otherwise, I'll never have any peace here. It's a joke, an orphan child with a living parent. Shame on you. That's not the man I married. You can't drink, you know that. You have a weak heart." Thomas woke up in a cold sweat, never drank another gram in his life, and rushed to the nursery. When he took the little, screaming lump in his arms and looked into its sky-blue eyes, a great wave of tenderness overwhelmed him forever. He realized there it was, the meaning of life, his most important value now. What he had to get up in the morning and work up a sweat for. Lola's mother, Vanessa, was a great help to him in the early days with Miranda. She moved in with Thomas and was always with Miranda, day and night, while the man was building his business. The mother-in-law took pity on her son-in-law, tried to manage everything around the house so that the man, when he arrived tired and exhausted, could get a good night's sleep and rest. Later, when Miranda went to first grade, the woman began to deteriorate badly and was often ill. Thomas did everything he could, got the scarce medicine, took her to the best doctors, but all in vain. When Miranda was 10 years old, Vanessa was gone. The girl took this loss hard, because her grandmother and father were the closest people to her. She and Daddy often went to the cemetery, looked after Mom and Grandmother's grave, and told them all their joys and troubles. This made it easier to bear the great loss. The businessman loved his wife, Lola, more than life itself, so after her sudden death, he could no longer let any woman into his soul. There were, of course, fleeting romances, but nothing like that. I never had that intimacy with anyone else, that feeling of being on the same wavelength with a man. Basically, all the women were interested in one way or another in a good financial situation. So the businessman could smell falsity and insincerity a mile away. And he so wanted someone to love him simply, as Lola, without money, as a person. But no one but his daughter could love him so sincerely. Miranda grew up smart and clever, always missed her father very much and joyfully threw herself on his neck when he, tired and exhausted, came home in the evening. Those were the best moments. He petted her, tickled her, corrected her bows, and listened attentively, without interrupting, to all her joys and troubles, which she naively told him about in her childish way. Thomas himself was brought up in austerity, and he also raised his daughter. Although in his heart he loved his Miranda madly, but tried not to indulge in anything, he dressed modestly, but tastefully. Miranda studied at an ordinary school with excellent marks. After her graduation, she entered the ordinary university as a designer. There was not even any question of going abroad. Thomas was most afraid that his trusting and kind daughter would not fall into the clutches of some rich man, for there are many who now want to steal his fortune. The businessman often secretly admired his princess. The same chiseled profile and oval face, expressive almond-shaped eyes, and smooth brown long hair, exactly like his late wife, and a sonorous, overflowing voice like Lola's. Her father strictly watched to ensure that his daughter studied to the best of her ability. She was soon to receive a diploma. He dreamed of gradually transferring her all the business and bring her into his business. The years of stress and anxiety were taking their toll. Her health was not good enough, and she wished to take a well-deserved rest. My daughter studied well, though sometimes they had disagreements, of course. The man often tutored his daughter. Miranda, you have to understand that all these expensive clothes, bling, silicone, and other things are just tinsel and dust in the eyes. A man must be a person. The main thing is to live his life according to his conscience, to tell only the truth, and to work hard. Nothing in life is given for nothing, remember. Only now the businessman realized. My daughter has grown up, she's all grown up now. She's not that shy and timid Miranda anymore. Maybe it was for the best. He shook his head and plunged back into his work, hoping that he and his friend really wouldn't be for long after all. His daughter had a head on her shoulders. After all, if anything, they would call a cab. Nancy whistled when she saw her friend in her new look. Wow, Miranda. I didn't even recognize you. Now that's more like it. Let's go quickly. They promise an interesting program in honor of the opening. The evening flew by unnoticed. The girls were having fun, drinking cocktails and eating ice cream, constantly catching the rapturous glances of men and envious women. They danced till they dropped. Their feet were humming. On leaving the cafe, the girls laughed merrily, remembering interesting moments. The weather was beautiful. It was a quiet May evening. We decided not to take a cab and walk around. Even the always cautious Miranda was in a playful mood. When they turned the corner, suddenly 3 young men came at them from around the corner. They were all pretty tipsy, cackling and making dirty jokes. One of them yelled, "Where did such lovely chicks come from? Would you like to relax, girls?" At first, the perky Nancy responded sharply to them, "Get out of here, guys." That's not who we are." But suddenly the muzzleloader grabbed Nancy hard by the shoulder. "Hey, beautiful, don't be a smart ass or we'll pluck your feathers." And turning to another young man, he said, "This one's mine, the black one. And you'll have to divide the other one somehow." She seemed nice too. All three of them laughed in unison and pressed the terrified girls against the wall. Miranda was terribly frightened for the first time in her life in such a situation. She mentally scolded herself as much as she could. Her thoughts raced in a whirlwind. Idiot! Why did I agree to go? My father had told me, and here was the result. I should have taken a cab. What should I have done? Mommy. When she felt the stale breath of cigarettes and alcohol right in front of her, she felt physically sick. She imagined what was about to happen to them, closed her eyes, and shrieked as loudly as she could. "Help, help somebody." I was sure I had a good idea, even though I knew that no one was likely to come to their aid at this late hour. Nancy tried to defend herself, but one of the thugs cooled her down with a slap. "Don't you move, or you'll get in trouble. You don't want a good thing, you'll get a bad thing. Relax, you'll like it." And the thugs cackled again, seemingly turned on by the fact that the girls were kicking. The circle of bullies closed and there seemed to be no way out. Suddenly, as if Miranda had heard the prayers, two young boys came running toward the offenders. One of them shouted, "Step away from the girls." Trinity turned around unhappily. "Get out of here, suckers, or you'll get some too. Look at you, you're all defensive." But still they loosened their grip, distracted, and Nancy and Miranda, sharply pushing their abusers away, slipped out of their grasp, fleeing as fast as they could. A scuffle ensued. The forces were not equal. The girls were shaking like an aspen leaf and were waiting for the denouement, hiding behind the kiosk and not daring to run out into the deserted street, fearing a chase. Miranda frantically searched her purse for the phone, trying to call the police or her father or a cab. But her hands were shaking and shaking, her thoughts were confused, and her voice was completely gone. Nancy, who had been watching the fight, saw her friend with the phone and besought her. "Wait a minute, don't call anyone. Those two have already kind of kicked the crap out of them. Let's go home now. Or your daddy will kill me and won't let you go anywhere else for sure. He doesn't like me anyway. What are you gonna tell the police? They'll ask what the hell you girls were doing out at night dressed like that. I know those cops, they just don't want to look for anyone." To their surprise, the guys who came to their aid quickly dealt with their attackers, and they scattered away. And the rescuers approached the girls. One of the guys had a huge bruise over his eye and a couple of abrasions. The second guy said, "Phew, it's a shame you got caught up with the local punk. It's a good thing we were in the neighborhood. Yes, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm James, and this is my friend Sergey, who, as you can see, was also in trouble. Why don't we walk you home? Don't worry, we won't hurt you." Nancy reacted first. "We don't mind, I'm Nancy, and this is Miranda, my friend. It's actually the first time we've ever walked home this late on our own head. Thank you guys, if it weren't for you, I don't know how it would have ended." Miranda stared at one of the guys with the bruise. He was just like the knight she had invented long ago, and rescued her like a real princess from the dragon's clutches. She liked Charles very much. He too looked at Miranda with evident interest. He jolly joked, told her that he had a black belt in karate, worked in a firm as a manager, and lived in an apartment. The second guy, James, was more humble, more silent, and stayed close to Nancy, catching her every word. Young people exchanged phone numbers and agreed that next weekend the four of them would go to the movies to see an interesting comedy, and that's when they said goodbye. At home, Miranda was waiting for a scolding from her father. While he was waiting for her, of course, he was awake and restless. No kidding, it was after midnight, and his daughter was still absent. Miranda had never come home so late. The businessman even drank some cognac, which he had not done since the death of his wife many years ago, to calm his frayed nerves. Just as the front door of the mansion slammed, the father pounced on his daughter. "Miranda, are you out of your mind? Did you look at your watch? Where have you been for so long? I almost lost my mind," he shouted. But the daughter only smiled absent-mindedly, listening to him half-heartedly, and said quietly, dreamily, "Daddy, don't scream. I think I'm in love. He's so." And she kissed her father on the cheek and went to her room. Just what I needed, Thomas thought irritably. Miranda scrolled through the morning, never sleeping a wink, still remembering Charles. The way he raised an eyebrow, the way his eyes lit up, the way his gaze. Gives me goosebumps. And brave and bold, just like in her girlish dreams. I've waited for my night. The whole week Miranda was not herself. Her studies did not go to her head at all. Everything fell out of her hands. She could hardly wait for the next weekend and the long-awaited meeting with Charles. All four of them went to the cinema. They liked the film very much. Then they walked along the night city. Then James went to see Nancy off, and Charles Miranda went home. On the way, the girl was freezing, and the guy threw his jacket over her shoulders. He smelled intoxicatingly of a pleasant masculine perfume. Saying goodbye, Charles hugged Miranda firmly and sharply and kissed her passionately. She even went round her head, for it was her first kiss. The romance between Miranda and Charles spun at cosmic speed. Movies, concerts, declarations of love. The girl lost her head completely. How the father did not resist, how he did not try to dissuade his daughter from hurrying up. All in vain. Miranda did not hear him at all. Thomas shouted, "My God, my girl, what are you doing? What demon has gotten into you?" "Well, you've known that bastard for a week. My father's heart tells me he's not a good man. He's slippery. He doesn't answer questions directly. He's always twisting and twisting. Let's wait a while, let's see each other again," he persuaded Miranda. But she was adamant. "What are you talking about? He saved me from bullies. He risked his life. He's great. You're just jealous, aren't you, Daddy?" "Don't worry, Daddy. I won't love you any less." And the daughter smiled dreamily again. It was getting close to a wedding. Charles promised to love her, to carry her in his arms, to shower her with roses, to give her mind-blowing nights. He whispered hotly in her ear, "You're mine alone. I won't give you to anyone." Miranda was melting from such a confession, hugging her beloved even tighter. The wedding was played in a big way in an expensive restaurant. All the newspapers trumpeted. The daughter of a famous millionaire, Miranda, marries an ordinary guy from the people. On the photo was happy Miranda, in a dazzling white dress with rhinestones, sewn according to her own design by the best tailors, which had no analogies, and happy, pompous Charles in a suit with a few strings and expensive shoes, of course, bought on the money of Miranda's father. After a lavish celebration, the newlyweds moved into their own mansion, purchased long ago by their father. It was a beautiful country house with a fireplace, a beautiful terrace, and a swimming pool. The entire yard was covered with blooming, fragrant roses, and there were also fountains and cobblestone paths on the grounds. Charles had never seen such beauty before in his life, so the first time he walked around, he just gasped and wondered about everything. A month later, Miranda received her diploma and began to actively penetrate into her father's business. She was a bright girl, grasping everything on the fly, but it took a lot of time. When Thomas began to introduce his daughter into his business, learning all the processes with her, many of his partners only laughed and did not take young Miranda into account. Behind the businessman's back there was talk. "Our boss has lost his mind in his old age. Decided to leave his business to his little brat. She's a woman, what's she gonna do? She'll let him go to hell, and we'll all be penniless on the street, you'll see." But after a couple of months, everyone was quiet and bit their tongues. Miranda turned out to be an excellent manager. She was great with partners and could negotiate with competitors. She supervised the network of ateliers professionally and often could do the lion's share of the work herself if she didn't like the result. Miranda approached everything responsibly, never letting anyone down. Even the veteran business sharks began to reckon with this stubborn and determined girl. Now Thomas was shaking hands and was often told, "What a daughter you have. She's a good girl. She's got a lot of people under her belt. You can count on her." A proud and satisfied businessman replied, "Yes, I have a Miranda like that. She's just like me." But Miranda's personal life has been getting worse and worse in spite of the fact that she got married not long ago. She naively assumed that Charles would also want to help her, and they would build and develop the family business together. The more so because, according to him, he had quit his previous job, the salary was not satisfactory, and he still could not find a new one. But time passed, and her boyfriend still was in no hurry to look for some kind of part-time job. He had no time, or the conditions were not suitable. In general, he had only excuses. It was strange for Miranda, as she had grown up in the example of her father who never sat at home and always considered that a man who was busy and nothing is similar to a droner. And it should be all the more humiliating for him to live at his wife's expense. Despite the fact that the girl loved Charles with no memory, she was beginning to get tired of it all and was not satisfied at all. Scandals began to occur frequently in the house. Miranda sincerely did not understand. "Charles, how long can you just sit around the house? Aren't you bored? Come to the office, I'll find you a place. We dreamed so much, together always and everywhere. And now what? I'm at work all day, I don't see you at all. What's wrong with that?" But my husband only sighed. "Miranda, honey, don't swear. I'm looking for myself. I don't have a heart for sewing your clothes. I don't know anything about it. I'm a specialist, a technician. Just be patient. I'll figure out what I want to do, and I'll definitely get a job." He cooed and pressed his wife, kissing her hotly. Kind and trustful Miranda trusted her beloved and waited. Since his wife was away all the time, Charles's day went like this. He would leisurely get out of bed around noon, drink coffee and cream on the terrace, swim in the pool. Then he would watch endless soap operas, greedily devouring delicacies, and in the evening he would pack up and drive his expensive car to a nightclub. I'd go home more and more often after midnight and drunk, and sometimes I'd bring dubious friends with me. And in the morning he would go back to sleep until lunchtime and everything would repeat itself in a circle. The cheeky man was quite satisfied with such a well-fed and free life. He was not going to look for any work. Let Miranda work, and let her father, a mean old fart. On those rare evenings when Miranda was at home, and on weekends, of course, he pretended to be a loving husband, so as not to arouse suspicions, and not to deprive him of a carefree and comfortable life. A couple of months went by like that. One day Miranda, returning from another business trip, accidentally found someone else's broken lipstick in the trash. And the lipstick was clearly inexpensive and of questionable quality. When she asked Charles about it, he made round eyes. "Bunny, how do I know whose lipstick it is? Yours must have been thrown out and forgotten. I certainly don't use it." Miranda was indignant. "It's not my lipstick, I'm sure. Has someone been visiting us? Is there something I don't know? What's this all about?" But as usual, the sneaky, cheeky guy got away with it. "Cute. You're tired, you're exhausted. So you're mad at me. Let me give you a bubble bath to relax you. Get that nonsense out of your head. Don't make a big fuss over nothing. Come here, let me kiss you." Before this incident, she had begun to notice a coldness in the relationship. There had been no intimacy for a long time. Her husband was referring to depression. He could not decide what to do. He had no time for intimacy, and she was very tired, and often just fell down without energy. But an uneasy worm of doubt settled in Miranda's soul. She began to compare recent events and looked at everything soberly. Was Charles cheating on her? This monstrous conjecture drilled her brain, depriving her of peace and sleep. She lay awake at night, looking at her husband asleep, thinking, is it really true? And her beloved Charles is a scoundrel. Miranda burst into tears in her pillow, unable to cope with herself. For the next couple of weeks, the girl began to stay less late, coming home from work early, hoping that this would warm up the relationship between her and her beloved, and become the same. But this only irritated Charles. He had to stay at home and pretend to be a loving husband. Frankly, Miranda bored the hell out of him. It seems that she is pretty, and her figure is nice, but she is so right and boring. And all she talks about is the damn business, and about future children. Miranda tried to create a romantic atmosphere, prepared everything in advance, lit candles, put on a beautiful negligee, waited for her beloved the whole evening, and fell asleep on the bed. Charles, on the other hand, wandered home in the morning, thinking that his wife had been asleep in her room for a long time. As it often happened, rather tipsy and reeking of women's perfume. A serious scandal broke out, Miranda screamed. "Where have you been? How often do you go out like that at night? I waited for you half the night." Charles, as always, smiled charmingly. "Swallow, don't shout. I was in a business meeting, getting a job, except that it suddenly dragged on. How beautiful you are. Come to me, my sunshine." And again Miranda swam. She could not resist Charles's charms. The couple made up. Still, something was going on behind her back. She could sense it, but she couldn't prove it. Business demanded her constant presence, and what Charles did in her absence, she had no idea. It took her another week to think about it, to prepare a plan. Miranda could not just leave it like that. She wanted to find out everything and set the record straight. She called her old childhood friend, William, who worked as a professional makeup artist, and made an appointment. When Miranda came to his studio, she was stunned by the number of wigs, hairpieces, mustaches, and other paraphernalia. Tons of makeup were on the shelves. William met her cheerfully. "Miranda, hi. Haven't seen you in ages. And you're still as beautiful as you were in high school. Do you know that I've been in love with you since the first grade? But you've never seen anything but science. What brings you to me? I'll make us some coffee. Do you want it with milk or black?" The boy was fussing. The girl even blushed at these compliments. "Hello, William. What a chatterbox you are. I have something important to ask you. It's a delicate matter, so promise me no one will find out." "Miranda, you're insulting. All my work takes place, so to speak, in confidentiality. There are all kinds of clients. Makeup is not always needed only for shoots and children's parties, and all kinds of things happen. So I always keep my mouth shut. What's up with you?" "You see, William, I recently got married." "Ah." The girl hesitated, paused, hesitating to begin, sipped a sip of scalding hot coffee. "And so I began to suspect that my husband was cheating on me. But I have no clear evidence, more a hunch and a woman's intuition. So I want to sneak in as a cleaning lady. I need you to disguise me as an old woman, preferably also to change the speech a little bit, that just husband did not recognize. Can you do that? I have to find out what he does while I'm gone." William scratched the back of his head. "Well, of course, for you, anything. We'll arrange everything in the best way. My mother won't find out. Are you sure you want to know the truth? In my practice, things often turn out unpredictably." He decided to warn the girl. But Miranda suddenly became serious and sad. "Any truth is always better than a lie. That's what my father taught me since I was a kid. I can't do it any other way. Otherwise, I'll just keep thinking about it and agonizing over it." Then William gave her a friendly hug and a pat on the shoulder. "Well, then call me. I'll make up any time. You can count on me. Don't worry beforehand. Maybe everything will work out, and you were wrong to get yourself all worked up. God willing," Miranda said and left. The next Monday, Miranda told Charles that she was leaving for a few days on a business trip. He seemed genuinely upset. "What, again? How could it be? You just went last week. You're not taking care of yourself at all, sweetheart. I'm going to miss you." I packed my suitcase, and just before I left the house, I threw all the flower pots off the windowsill with a bang. They flew to pieces, and the earth was all over the room, including the snow-white Persian carpet. Charles ran in and was taken aback. "What's that noise? What's going on? Wow, how come? You didn't hurt yourself, did you?" Miranda said. "Well, I opened the window unluckily. I'll call the cleaning company on the way. A cleaner will come and clean it up. Don't worry." Miranda kissed her husband, got into the car, and drove away. Except she didn't go to the airport. She went to Williams. 2 hours later, an elderly, gray-haired woman emerged from the cabin. Special mouth guards made her speak with an accent. Even her father would not recognize Miranda in this image, so skillfully the craftsman depicted wrinkles and changed the shape of her face and the shape of her eyes. After dressing and taking the necessary cleaning equipment, Miranda, in the guise of a cleaning lady, rang the doorbell with trepidation. Charles came out to open the door with a glass of whiskey in his hand and a displeased face. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Miranda, stammering and mangling, barely spoke. "Hello, I'm here to clean. I'm on call." "Oh, you're from the cleaning company? It's taking a long time. Come on in." And he let the cleaner pass, looking her over from all sides. Miranda began to clean up the earth and splinters, whispering, Oh, why couldn't my wife clean it up? What's so dirty? Or aren't you married?" Charles said with a sour expression. "Married in my head. But you see, she's like a businesswoman, and she doesn't do anything around the house. It's dusty and dirty everywhere. And she's not very bright herself, no skin and no face. I'm sick and tired of it. She lives off me at my expense. She's a hungry girl. When she gets here, I'll give her a beating." Miranda almost suffocated from such rudeness and barely pulled herself together. "I wanted to take off my makeup and grab the bastard right away." She sighed and continued, stammering and mangling. "I'll have to come back tomorrow. The carpet can't be cleaned in one go. And there's dust on the shelves. I don't think we've cleaned in a long time." "I can clean the whole house thoroughly," she suggested. Charles thought for a while and said, "Actually, I have plans for tomorrow, so come back after 2 in the afternoon, not before. And why do you have such old and ugly people in your company? If you were younger and prettier, I'd have a lot of fun with you too. So tomorrow, instead of you, call someone younger and prettier." He laughed. Miranda was out of breath. What kind of nonsense is he talking? Is he really like that? And everything between them was just a mask and a pretense for the sake of money and a rich life. The girl thought feverishly. Now the real Charles stood before her, not the Charles she had known all this time. A boor and a scoundrel. Quickly retreating, Miranda went to the hotel. All night she cried into the pillow. Rose-colored glasses began to fall from her eyes. It was bitter and offensive. But the girl did not even suspect that this was not all the surprises from her beloved. In the morning, William again skillfully manipulated with the makeup. And in half an hour, our heroine was near her home. Nobody opened the door for a long time, and Miranda was about to leave. But what was her surprise and shock when her friend Nancy opened the door, wearing only her Charles shirt. She had disheveled hair and was obviously here for the night. Grudgingly, her friend wanted to kick the old woman out. "What do you want here? The boss is still asleep. It's been a stormy night. Come back in the afternoon," and was about to slam the door. But then a sleepy Charles came out. "What's all the yelling about?" "Oh, it's the cleaning lady. What a madwoman. She came in the morning. I told the man to come in the afternoon. What kind of people are these? All right, let her go and clean the bedroom, and you and I will have one last flirtation in the hall. Right, my sweet kitty?" And he slapped Nancy playfully, as she was leaving with her lover, the one who had been their sword. "You have only one thing on your mind. When are you going to leave that fool behind and go to the warm islands like we talked about? Have you emptied her account yet? How long can you drag this out? Or you're not going to do it and you're fine with it." Charles unceremoniously, not shying away from the janitor, as if she were an empty space, replied, "Have patience, my love, I'm almost there. It's just that this wretch won't let me near the papers yet. She's already in my sore throat. There is no one better than you. Come to me," and he picked up Nancy in his arms and carried her to his bedroom. Miranda stepped into her room on stiff legs, unaware of herself. Everything inside was bubbling with rage and such treachery. It was a punch in the gut. She could not believe the reality of what was happening. Right now, behind the wall, her husband was making out with her childhood best friend. And not for the first time. This is some kind of wild thing. With trembling hands, she took off her makeup, changed her clothes, and walked in on Charles without knocking, catching the scoundrels right on the hot seat. To say they were stunned is nothing to say. You should have seen their faces. They were frozen like plaster statues. Charles was the first to come to his senses, and in a hoarse, disruptive voice he began, "Miranda, where did you come from? Are you here already? Wait, let me explain. Oh, it's not what you think, although it's hard to believe. He was babbling." Miranda said quietly, "Don't bother, what's there to explain?" "All right, you bastard, but Nancy, how could you? How could you? How could you? Why?" I never expected such meanness from anyone but you." My friend hastily covered herself with a sheet and screamed hysterically. "It's good that you found out. What did you think? Some people get millions for nothing and others get nothing. I've been in love with Charles for a long time. We were together before you. It was all his idea, and he sent those bandits he knew to seduce you foolishly and to get money. Who needs you? Who would want you for nothing? You little mouse, always pretending to be right and clever. What's wrong with me? I want to live a nice life too," shouted Nancy. Miranda couldn't stand it. "That's enough. Get out of my house, both of you. I don't want to hear from you in half an hour," and slammed the doors and went out onto the terrace. At first, she sat in complete prostration, not even able to cry, just a huge black hole and emptiness inside. She thought it was just a bad dream, and now she would wake up and everything would go back to the way it was. Waiting for the traders to leave, Miranda really called a cleaning service and cleaned the house to a shine, throwing away absolutely everything that reminded her of Charles. Out flew all the photos and joint purchases. She wanted to erase this man from her life forever. The wedding ring rattled to the bottom of the pool. She walked around the empty house, as if it were a stranger's house. She felt so sick and disgusted. Two of her nearest and dearest had at one moment become her sworn enemy. How could she go on living and trusting people after that? She took out a bottle of expensive vintage cognac, opened it, and sipped on a couple of good sips. The liquor burned her throat, and she coughed and finally cried. Then she dialed William's number, and, choking on her sobs, she said, "Come here, I feel so bad." William didn't have to ask me anything. He understood everything from the word go. He arrived literally 15 minutes later and found a half-drunk Miranda in the living room. She was clutching a handful of pills in her hands, about to do something irreparable. After knocking the pills out of his hands, he pulled the girl against him. "Are you crazy, you fool? You've got someone to grieve over. I ran your Charles through my channels. He's a regular hustler and a crook, so it's all for the best. He's not worth your little finger. Cry, cry, you need to cry out your grief now." And so they sat until morning on the terrace. William wrapped Miranda with a warm blanket, gave her hot herbal tea to drink, and stroked her head like a little girl, whispering, "It's all over, my dear. No one will hurt you anymore. It's over. At least now you know who's who." And Miranda cried at first, and then just sat quietly. She felt so warm and comfortable in the arms of this essentially strange man. He reeked of serenity and confidence that everything was going to be all right. William was very supportive of Miranda. He was always there, distracting her at weekends and keeping her from moping. Charles tried to call and pound the doorstep, hoping that Miranda, as usual, would not resist and forgive the rascal. But William intervened here too. He talked to him like a man. "So, you're an idiot. I found out everything about you. You're an unemployed bum with a lot of debts and credits. If you ever show your face to Miranda again, I'll send a debt collector to break more than just your ribs. I advise you to go far away. There won't be a second warning." It didn't have to be repeated twice. Charles was rumored to be out of town for good. Nancy did not grieve long either. She was used to changing suitors like gloves, and was already walking in the park hand in hand with the next one. Miranda's father, Thomas, laughed a long time when he found out how his daughter had taught the rascal a lesson. What a trick to come up with such a multi-track. "Well done, my daughter, just like her father. And that scoundrel will be punished. He will know how to steal millions of other people's money." The man was glad that at last his daughter had seen the true face of that scoundrel. Though Miranda, of course, was pitiable, she felt very badly that tragedy. She lost all her weight and became sad. We even had to enlist the help of a psychologist to bring her back to normal life. I liked William Thomas right away. The guy is honest and open, no stone unturned. And most importantly, he looked at Miranda that way. You could tell at once that he loved her. But he did not cross the line. He was a friend, and patiently waited for the girl to recover from her trauma and to be ready for a new relationship. 3 years have passed. Miranda and William had long ago married, celebrating the celebration modestly in a family circle. Each went about his business. William understood how difficult it was for Miranda, how tired and exhausted she was. So he tried to take care of most of the household chores. On coming home, the girl always had a hot dinner, a wonderful tea with mint and sea buckthorn, and a loving husband. Their beloved son Mike, a mischievous little shooter and fidget, was growing up in the family. Thomas was now an honorary grandfather and was happy to take care of his grandson, giving him all his free time. At last, there was peace and quiet in the family. On weekends, all used to gather together at Miranda's mansion. The men played chess and talked about life and politics. Then they all played volleyball together and drank a special, fragrant tea infused with herbs, which only William knew how to make. One day, the whole family was on their way home after a great weekend walk in the park. They stopped at a nearby store to buy something delicious for dinner and a kinder surprise for my son. A full, grouchy cleaning lady was mopping the floor on the doorstep. She muttered irritably, "Walking and walking, no peace, trampling and trampling." Suddenly, her voice sounded painfully familiar to Miranda. She stopped and looked closely at this woman. Thick, sloppy makeup, overdone by bad chemistry. Her hair looked like a dishwashing sponge, but her eyes were the same Nancy eyes. Except instead of mischievous looks, they were full of hopelessness. An astonished Miranda exclaimed, "Nancy, is that you? I never would have recognized you. Do you work here?" The woman looked up and saw before her a blooming, well-groomed, and happy Miranda. The same long brown hair, the same shapely figure, and the same fine suit. Next to her stood a sturdy, solid man and a baby who looked just like him. "Miranda, are you?" Dumbfoundedly, Nancy said. The women went outside, and Nancy lit a cigarette. "Yes, Miranda, life has broken me. I never finished technical school. I had no time for fun. My mother died, and they won't hire me anywhere without an education. So I carry a rag in a store. I'm in no hurry to provide, and there's less and less of them. I have no luck in life. You were born under a lucky star, and your father's a millionaire, everything on a silver platter. You look great. Is that your husband and son?" Surprised, Miranda did not know what to say. How could it be? Not a trace of the former beauty was left. "Yes, Nancy, a husband and a son." "Don't you have children? Where's Charles? Why aren't you together? You betrayed me for him, didn't you?" Nancy waved her hand irritably. "Oh, first we broke up, but then we got back together. This idiot got into a drunken brawl and hit someone hard with a bottle. He's in jail now, so go to hell. He ruined my whole life, you damned womanizer. Never missed a skirt. And the baby. I'm not going to have children. I had a bad abortion with Charles. I thought I'd have another baby, but there was a complication. That's all." "Miranda, I'm sorry about that," mumbled the woman under her breath. Miranda only smiled. "God forgive Nancy. I'm even grateful to you. If I hadn't caught you together then, Charles would have kept fooling me, and I would have suffered. I never would have met William. Now I have only loved and devoted people around me, no traitors. Goodbye, Nancy." Miranda took Mike by the hand and walked away with William, never having bought anything at the store. The baby tugged at his mother and asked, "Who's that aunt?" Miranda replied, "It's nothing, son, just an acquaintance." Nancy shouted afterwards, "Listen, Miranda, why don't we meet and have a cafe like we used to?" Miranda turned around and shook her head. "No, Nancy, we have nothing more to talk about. And we don't want to see each other either." The shopkeeper came out and shouted at the woman sternly, "That's enough of this fuss. Who's going to work?" Nancy returned to her dusty back room, angrily kicked the hateful rag and burst into tears, panting with anger and despair, smearing mascara on her cheeks. She had never realized that she and no one else was to blame for her broken, unsuccessful fate. Nothing was given by magic. Everything had to be achieved by one's own labor, wit, and good deeds. It does not matter how much money you have or who your father is. The main thing is to be human.